Hello, my name is Jeremiah Mattiola, and I am speaking today on toxic leadership within the athletic industry, specifically talking to coaches, athletic directors in the collegiate sports. What is toxic leadership? Toxic leadership is when a leader or supervisor characterizes toxic leadership conduct or a manager as a structural and repetitive behavior that undermines the company's legitimate interests by weakening and sabotaging its goals, its tasks, its revenue, its productivity, its subordinates' motivation, its well-being, and work satisfaction. These all lead up into having very specific characteristics that create toxic leadership within an organization, within a company. And some of these characteristics include greed, including narcissism, discrimination, and so many other things that are absolutely demotivating for your staff and minimize the amount of attraction to this style of leadership that most people want. And within the art of what we all love doing, which is coaching soccer players, which is coaching basketball players, whatever sport we're coaching, a toxic leadership can lead to having a demotivated team that is not going to produce the results that you want. And so having traits such as greed, such as narcissism, such as discrimination, such as not caring for your players, caring for your staff, caring for your assistants, whatever it is, all those things create toxic leadership within an organization. And when it comes to the area of athletics, this is a very, very important thing because historically people have always thought toxic leadership would lead to results, but we're now learning with the next generation that they need a balance between hard toughness and a coach that actually cares about what's happening inside of them. Moving on, 5 toxic leadership behaviors that will poison the culture of your athletic department, that will poison the culture of your team. It will poison the culture on every single part that you are trying to accomplish. And the first thing is micromanagement. If you are, as a coach, almost not allowing your players to have a little bit of freedom to express their ability, to express themselves, whether they're on the field, on the court, in whatever sport they're playing, on the track. You want to be able to coach players to a level to where you have done the work, but that they're able to express themselves. And if there's too much rigidness, there's too much strategic, too much managing of the players, it can lead to players almost underperforming. And we'll get into that a bit later. The second trait of behavior that leads to poisoning a culture is poor communication. As a coach, as a manager, as a director, if you are not good at communicating to your staff, communicating to your players, communicating to whatever it is going to hinder your organization. Third thing is focusing on the what rather than the why. The fourth thing is a lack of trust. And the last thing is the us versus them mentality. And so let's go into these a bit deeper and get a bit more understanding. So, especially at the collegiate level, a micromanager, basically, because they do not have the full trust to allow someone to express himself when they've been given a task, they almost like just completely consume them to a point where that person feels so locked. They don't feel like they can express themselves in the things that they are strong in. They feel like they have to be so rigid. And so let me give you a definition. A micromanager, instead of telling an employee or subordinate what a task must be accomplished and by when, will watch the employee's actions closely and supply frequent criticism. I'll say that again, frequent criticism of the employee or subordinate's work and processes. Employees who are being managed because of being micromanaged become frustrated and start trifling in resources, don't end up going the way they should be. And so that is your business textbook definition. But in the world of sports, as a coach, if you are constantly criticizing your players, constantly criticizing your staff without having a balance with the other side of knowing how to celebrate, knowing how to give freedom for them to express themselves, you are going to have players who are frustrated. You're going to have staff who are frustrated, and it's going to poison the culture you're trying to create. And any coach that wants to be a winning coach knows they have to create a culture that is strong, that is well put together, a culture that bleeds through every single part, whether you're the starting player to the water boy to the medical staff. It is so important that you create a culture where people know we're all working towards the same task, but they don't feel like they're being completely controlled. The second behavior that we mentioned is poor communication. And communication is at the center of everything you are trying to do to achieve your goals. There is nothing you can try and achieve in the world of anything, not even just the world of sports, but in the world of anything that you can achieve without good communication. Because communication creates strong connections, it encourages trust, and it helps build morale, it helps build engagement, and it will destroy a lack of trust. And I think communication is very important, especially as a coach. The way you communicate things to your players, the way you communicate things to your assistants, to your coaching staff, to your medical staff, to your athletic directors, everything and how you communicate is so important to the culture you are trying to create within your teams, within your organizations. And at the end of the day, a coach isn't going to know everything. So the more communication he is with his medical staff, with his assistant coach, with the guys who are doing research, the guys who are watching film, all of those things are very, very important in order to create a great culture. Next thing is focusing on the what rather than the why. And this is very important because you have to have a vision of the longer term that tells you where you're going, whether as an organization, as a club, wherever you're going needs to have a vision, and there needs to be a purpose that everyone underneath you understands why you're going there. Not just what it is. Obviously, if we're here to play basketball, we're here to play basketball. But if our vision is that we want to win a national championship, or is our vision that we want to create the best, loving, family-oriented culture, then everyone underneath you needs to understand that vision. And so focusing on just what we're doing and not the why leads to a poison culture, because if people don't have a why, they're not going to have anything that's going to be motivating them to continue to get better, continue to grow. And so this is something that very much causes a poison culture within an organization. Next thing is a lack of trust, and we talked about this in the communication part, but this is the most important attribute you can develop as a leader. And as a coach, if your players trust you, then they are going to play for you in a whole different way than when they don't trust you. And I think it's very important, because when you lack trust, you lack control. It's that simple. When you lack trust, you lack control within your organization. And that is something that is very detrimental, especially as a coach who is trying to win games, who is trying to win championships, who's trying to develop young people. If the young people or the old people, whoever you're coaching, whatever level, don't trust you, then you won't be able to lead them, because you've lost all control of being able to influence them in the way that you want them to go. So the last but not least, the us versus them mentality. And this mindset will split your organization, it will split your team, it will split your staff, and it all ultimately will ruin your culture. And this mindset is one where it is created through inadequate teamwork, mistrust, and just honestly a lack of communication. And so at the end of the day, as a leader, you've got to be humble and accept that nobody can do it on their own. The head coach can't do it on their own. The assistant coach can't do it on their own. The star player can't do it on his own. Everybody needs everyone to work. And so the us versus them, the coaches versus the players, the coaches versus the athletic department, it never works. And it's very important to create unity within your culture in order to avoid toxic leadership. So again, those 5 things: micromanagement, poor communication, lack of trust, the us versus them mentality, and focusing on the what instead of the why are all 5 behaviors that poison a culture, especially in an athletic department. Now, the causes of toxic leadership, and this is very important because there are so many different things that can cause you to be a toxic leader, whether it's in your sport, whether it's in your organization, or whatever it is. But specifically when it comes to the area of athletics, if you are a leader where your ego is completely takes over anybody's opinion, it is a characteristic that is going to hurt your culture rather than build your culture. If you are a coach where you make decisions too quick without considering from your assistant coaches or your medical staff, and you're just kind of this, well, I know what we're doing, I know where we're going, and I kind of make a decision on your own, that can be very detrimental to the people underneath you, because they feel like you don't value the work that they are doing to try and help you make the best informed decision. And the last one I'll touch on is being rewarded for your bad leadership. And this is something in the area of sports that is very, very important, because in the area of athletics, for too long, toxic leaders, toxic coaching has been rewarded by getting results. And so coaches are not realizing that their methods that are actually toxic are actually leading to results. And so they don't realize, but it's actually destroying the culture of their team, destroying the culture of the program long term. It may in the short term win you a few games, but we all know that the teams that win championships are the teams that have strong organizational culture, the teams that have strong places surrounding the organization that comes from a strong leader. And at the end of the day, that's very, very an important factor. And so for a long time, toxic leadership has been rewarded with results, but we know that in the long run, that will never work, especially for a sports organization. It will get exposed eventually, and whatever has been working before will fall, because a bad culture only takes 1 second for everything to fall apart. And so those are just some of the main causes of toxic leadership within athletic industry. Last but not least, how toxic leaders destroy people as well as their organizations. And so we talked about the causes, we talked about some traits, but there's so many specific ways in how a coach in an organization can not just destroy the people underneath him, but destroy the overall organization. And there's a few specific types of leaders that especially in the athletic industry, have such a detrimental effect long term. And one of the first ones we'll look at here is the glory seeker. And if a coach is at all expense just looking for personal glory, public visibility, irrespective of whatever contribution or whatever means necessary, if that is their sole focus, then that organization is never going to be successful in the long term. Because if your only goal is to be, I want to be the best coach, and I'm going to make sure I get all the accolades, I'm going to make sure that everyone knows I'm the best coach, I'm the one here, and you are doing that at the expense of growing the people underneath you, growing your organization, growing your team, then you have done an absolutely poor job in creating a culture, and actually ultimately you will end up destroying that organization, and most likely you'll lose your job because someone else is going to have to come in and fix your mess. And so that's just one of the ways that toxic leaders destroy a company. I think another one to specifically touch on in terms of the athletic world is almost acting like a monarch, and that is administrating the organization as if it's your empire for your personal use and all of the properties that come with it. And if you obviously, as a head coach of a ball club, you have a big responsibility, a massive responsibility to lead an organization, to lead a program. But at the end of the day, it's much bigger than yourself. And if you are running a team, running a ball club, all about yourself, all about building up your own empire, all about building up, just like we talked about with the glory seeker, you will end up going into a place where everything becomes about you and nothing becomes about the team. And again, ultimately, the people underneath you are going to suffer because they don't feel like they're being cared about or cared for. And the organization as a whole, again, will be destroyed because everything has become about one person rather than a group of individuals coming together to achieve the same task. And so toxic leadership really does have such a domino effect from the people underneath you all the way to the entire organization. To conclude, toxic leadership, in essence, is a chronic condition that on an organization that impacts both the well-being of the people and the well-being of the organization. And it is so important to understand it has a double effect. It is not just the well-being of the people, but it's also the well-being of the organization. And at the end of the day, toxic leaders show toxic attitudes that hinder self-esteem, the motivation, and again, the well-being of subordinate. And when it comes to the athletic realm, when we are talking about coaching players, we are talking about leading staff, leading medical trainers, whatever it is, reporting to athletic directors. It is so important that your leadership is building up the self-esteem, it is building up the motivation, and it's building up the well-being of of the players underneath you, of the staff underneath you. If people don't feel validated in their work, they're never going to feel motivated to accomplish the task that you want to accomplish. And so it's very important that the ways you can boost these motivation is to help grow yourself as a leader by recognizing your toxic traits and enhancing resistance to toxic leadership practices by recognizing the development, the behaviors, and the consequences of toxic leadership. If you don't understand and see how your behaviors are having a bad consequence, then you're never going to be able to stop it. But the key to running a successful organization is to kill those traits when they are minor so they don't become major. And that is very important in allowing your ball club, your organization to be successful in the athletic realm. So thank you very much for listening today, and I hope that you were able to gain a good insight knowledge of how to defeat toxic leadership within your organization in order to be successful. Thank you.